Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and there's more fraudulent market rigging by banks. I know, who would have thought, and it's mostly targeting Canada here because as this Financial Post article goes into, Canada's 6 biggest banks accused of rigging rate to boost profits. And as the article goes into, a Colorado-based pension fund accused Canada's 6 biggest banks and 3 foreign lenders of conspiring to manipulate a Canadian interest rate benchmark to boost illegitimate profits on derivatives trades for several years until 2014. Right. The Fire and Police Pension Association of Colorado alleged in a New York court filing that the banks sought to boost their earnings from derivative trades by manipulating the Canadian Dealer Offered Rate, or CDOR, a benchmark lending rate. The alleged violations, including conspiracy under the U.S. Sherman Act and manipulation of the Commodity Exchange Act, took place for almost 7 years, according to the filing. The proposed class action dispute names Toronto Dominion Bank, Royal Bank of Canada, Bank of Nova Scotia, Bank of Montreal, Canadian Imperial Bank of Commerce, and National Bank of Canada, as well as HSBC Holdings PLC, Bank of America Corp, and Deutsche Bank AG. All the banks declined to comment on
Deutsche Bank you said at the end there, Joe?
Yeah, who would have thought? All the banks declined to comment on the matter. The fund, which manages about $4.66 billion, claims banks reduced the amount of interest owed, resulting in investors paying more or receiving less than the amount generated through trading derivatives based on CDOR. The pension fund said it made $1.2 billion in CDOR-based derivatives trades over the period, and this just gets more extensive. John, you have more on this.
Well, what happened was that they used about $1 trillion worth of CDOR-based swaps in order to manipulate this whole market, the whole interest rate market, because this is short-term interest rates that they use. This is exactly like the LIBOR rigging that happened with the London Whale and all that. Well, this is the exact same just on the Canadian LIBOR. So that one actually controls all the other interest rates that we have here in Canada. So now they've been manipulating that. They manipulate every single other interest rate that are created in the banking system in Canada.
It's still part of like a globalist bankster rigging agenda.
Oh, 100%, Josh. Now, what they're looking at, Canadian regulators are heavily in here, trying to step in and prevent a potential for another manipulation of the scale that will happen in 2014 when this happened. Meanwhile, I don't see anything really happening. You have all these regulators here in Canada. They're just there for fun, having they make jobs, I guess, for the government. But other than that, they're pretty useless. They are, the banks here in Canada are some of the biggest and most controlling in the world.
Scotiabank is huge. Scotiabank's all over the place.
Yeah, I know. So they are really big banks on a world scale. And of course, RBC was involved in the LIBOR rigging together with 16 other banks as well. So they've been on the game here. They work exactly like every other single bank, especially like Deutsche Bank, our favorite.
Well, yeah,
bank,
the usual players, HSBC and Deutsche Bank.
They're some of the worst banks in the world. HSBC and Deutsche Bank has been involved in every single scam that's been out there that has been perpetrated, and they dealt with it. And of course, you got to remember, today's banks, Josh, all of them have set aside funds, litigation funds, in order to take care of all their mishaps. They make so much money on it. Meanwhile, they pay a little bit of homage back to the government to leave them alone and to continue doing what they're doing. These banks are a bunch of fraudsters, and they would just continue doing this over and over and over again until the economies run dry, when there's no more debt to be borrowed out and no more derivatives to be created on all this other money that is slushing around in the world. And then it's game over for them. It always has been. Every single time they manipulated markets and they created these fiat systems that they fractionally lend money, they always collapse in on themselves, and there's no doubt that will happen once again in history.
Well, and people, we have to remember, empower these banks by giving them their money. That's a big problem here, because as we try and go into as much as possible, if your money's in the bank, it's not yours, it's the bank's. So people are basically giving them or lending them their money as depositors.
That's right, yeah.
And, they don't have to give it back. And if there's a bail-in or something like that where they just steal depositors' money, there's not a whole lot you can do. The insurance on that money is next to zero.
I have a suggestion. Next time you go to your banker, ask him, how much money do I get to lend you this money when you deposit a check, and you'll see in their face. It'd be pretty funny to see, but that's actually what's happening when you give your money to the bank to deposit in your bank account. They actually can use that to do this market manipulation and trading and all this scams.
Too many people expect that their bank is just making all their profits off of when you use your debit card somewhere and they make like half a cent or something. Like, that's not how it works. It comes down to they have your money. They are that rich because they own your money when you lend it to them.
And they can trade with it. That's the thing. You used to have the savings and loans banks where it was just savings in and then loans out. Well, now you have savings and loans merged with investment banks, which is the current system, and they could just invest and just trade and bet on anything that they want with your money in the bank. That's what they're using in order to gamble in this global world monopoly that we're casino, that gulag, as Max Scotia calls it, that we created.
Well, I mean, we could go into so many things with the banks, how they manipulate markets and monetary system. Of course, going into the bubbles that we see across the board, the derivatives trading, the amount of manipulation that goes into, for example, the housing market. It's just absolutely insane. We can go into all of those things because all of those things are very prevalent in what the banksters are trying to manipulate.
But we have. Just go and watch.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Right? But it would take all day to go into everything. I mean, the banks are involved in everything. They have their tentacles in everything, and they are working with governments and central banks. But with that said, John, is there anything more to the story that is worth talking about here? Because this is a pretty deep story here. I mean, this is going to involve... Well, I would say that it would involve some heads rolling, but honestly, when do these guys...
Well, yeah, that's... what happened in the London Whale story was that there was heads rolling. They got rid of... a whole bunch of bankers in England, in RBC, several other, RBS, sorry, and several other banks. The head of Barclays got kicked out, and a whole bunch of others. It's not going to change anything. The whole banking system in itself is full of corruption and just the mindset of people just making money with money. You got to remember, money has this same exact trigger in your brain as cocaine does. So if you ever done cocaine, I'm not, but if you ever done cocaine, it's the same exact feeling as it is making substantial amounts of money.
It triggers that same euphoria in your brain.
And that's why, of course, the bankers use their newly made money to snort cocaine with. How about doubling down? It's really great to really get that super high in order to feel fulfilled in your life after you literally raped and pillaged the populace.
And then there's like the eventual fall guy, which would be Bernie Madoff. Wow, look, they actually did no. Look, they punished like one guy to make an example of him in the media.
Yeah, it's like Wells Fargo, Josh. We talked so many times about the corrupt organization of Wells Fargo. Just go and look at those videos and you'll see like over and over and over again. And then you got Papa Warren Buffett out there sitting down with, you naughty boy, don't do that. It's just stupid. And
bailing out housing bubbles and then daring to
with the home equity bank, right? Like he bailed out home equity bank. Nobody's talking about it. They just got dead silent after the $13 billion, I believe it was, bail out a home equity bank, and nobody's talking about it. What happened? They were bankrupt. They were literally bankrupt, and then somebody just shoved some money in order to just get some credits, somewhere else.
Yeah, and then you look at something like Deutsche Bank, which is probably the most obvious, most criminal bank I think I've ever seen, ever. Maybe HSBC comes close in rigging gold and silver markets, etc. We've gone into that. At one point in 2016 when we reported on them, Deutsche Bank's derivative exposure was $75 trillion, guys. $75 trillion. And the entire GDP of Germany was something like $3 trillion or something like that.
Well, yeah, the world total GDP is about 260 something, I believe. Don't quote me on that, as I just pulled it out of my head, but it's just insane amount of derivatives.
And $1.6 trillion or quadrillion dollars or something. Yeah,
it's
in derivatives
anywhere that they say worldwide. It's anywhere on the low end from 600 trillion to 1.2 quadrillion derivatives that they created. All these swaps, all these collateralized debt obligations, credit default swaps. Yeah. It's just insane amount of derivatives that they created in order to just play the markets and make more money with no money. Like this derivative money didn't really exist at all and doesn't even get accounted for in the money supply.
It's incredibly dangerous.
So that just tells you like how risky it is, and margin debt and all these other derivative types of things that you use to invest in different things. These are what the banks have created, this infrastructure that are so highly over leveraged. And so insanely, over betting on things with all these. But the things is, all these banks are interwoven. It's like a net that the little spider have woven himself. When you punch your fist through that net, which is a shitty net in my point of view, you're gonna see all these banks crumbling down, and just gonna see all these spiders just falling down to the ground.
Weaving spiders come not here, as the Freemasons I think say. And it's interesting though, with all this happening, people still go to the banks through all these ups and downs. They still go to the bank and get their loan. They still get to go to the bank and take up these, investment strategies that the banksters are telling them to get involved in that only benefit the banksters and might benefit you 1 or 2%.
People repeat this over and over and over again. And as we saw Bitcoin, crash, they called it a collapse. Of course, in the news, it was a lot of fun watching it.
A lot of fun trading.
All the people actually buying it at the high and then just panic selling, as we've been talking about here, Josh. This is what's happening it's going to happen in the stock market over again. Like they continue to do it and having these mass emotions built into it and screwing themselves big time over, but without getting any financial education.
They're heading right towards a wall though, and the fact of the matter is, as long as people get educated on these issues, they are toast. They are done in the near future. The banks are all going to fall into their footprint. They're going to be Lehman Brothers 2.0 on steroids, and we're going to see that happen.
Deutsche Bank, we talked about that so many times, that they are one of the main proponents, and they are one of the main banks in Germany. They're one of the biggest lenders there. They've been borrowing, also going into that, they've been borrowing debt to all over Europe, which nobody's going to pay back ever. So these banks are just so much doo-doo that they have no clue. And I'm just going to mention before we leave this, in my book, I talk about their insurance, talking about how they manipulate everything and the risks involved in it with derivatives and so on. They only have 0.39% of your deposits under 100,000 Canadian dollars insured. So that should just tell you that's the money that they use to play around with in the markets and create derivatives and so on with. And that's how little money is in actually insuring it. So you should really start looking at your money and your economics and what you have in your physical holdings, and actually start thinking about it. Do a lot of research, because if you don't, you're going to get stuck in this old gaming system with the banks and the government and get screwed over again. Yeah,
absolutely. What book? The End of Freedom, How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us?
No, that was the Canada, the greatest economy in the world.
One of your books,
That's
up on Amazon.
Yeah, you should check out this if you want to know more about the Canadian banking system. They actually got bailed out. That they never told anybody about back in 2008 to the Troubled Asset Relief Program, the TARP program. So there's so much behind these banks. They say, the banks were so great here in Canada. No, they got bailed out as well. All these banks are just living on an air castle of fluffy money that are just floating everywhere around the world, like little, I don't know what to call it. I usually call it sewage. So I think fluffy is not a nice word for it. But anyways, these banks are going to fail miserably again. And we're going to see some bank failures here in Canada very soon, because this is not going to be able to go on forever.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, just be safe, my friends. Be self-sustainable. Be financially responsible. It comes down to you as an individual. You cannot have freedom without self-responsibility, financial responsibility. That's a hallmark. So with that said, thank you very much for going into this with us, John. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth.
Be the change.
Like what you see here at WHAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so overwhelmingly demonetized and censored by YouTube as the Anti-Defamation League comes in and flags all of our content as hate speech. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, where you get paid in the upvote of your post via Steem, the cryptocurrency. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description and the comments below, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. And don't forget to come on down to Anarchapulco in Acapulco, Mexico in February, one of the best events of the year, and you can save money on your tickets by typing in promo code WAM. That's WAM. We'll leave the link below for you, and until next time, don't forget to subscribe. This is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.